Addiction is the epidemic of our generation. Every 4 minutes, people are overdosing in the U.S. Drugs and alcohol are tearing our families apart. The only way to combat addiction is through proper treatment and customized care. As people are slipping into the grips of addiction, nationwide Banyan Treatment Center facilities stand as the leader in providing growth through recovery. Addiction does not discriminate. Do not let yourself or someone you know become another devastating statistic. Call now, 855-6-BANYAN.
Thanks, and thanks to McShin for having this great event. And I appreciate being invited to share some thoughts and a story tonight. So we're talking about the criminal justice system, and I'm going to use two shorthands during my talk, which one is CJS for criminal justice system, SUD for substance use disorder. I'm going to talk about the criminal justice system based on the following statement. The criminal justice system was never designed, was never intended, is not equipped, and is not capable of dealing with one of the most serious mental health epidemics we've ever faced, opioid addiction. They just can't do it. I say this partially from personal experience. Our oldest son developed a heroin addiction 13 years ago and started getting into trouble. He was caught shoplifting several times, had a run-in with the police during a drug buy, caught with drugs during a traffic stop. As these charges accumulated, he received jail time, fines, was put on probation. Now that is when the real problems began. The court fined him. They had fees for him being in jail. They appointed him, he had a court-appointed attorney because he had zero money, and then they charged him for it and added that to the money he owed, on and on. As a result of being incapable of paying the fines, his license was suspended. This made it difficult, if not impossible, to get to mandated drug tests, probation appointments, often in the middle of the day, required counseling, not to mention work. The entire system seems structured to make sure that once someone is in the system, it's next to impossible to get out. It's like that Eagles Hotel California line. You can check out, but you can never leave. There are many stories of people starting out with relatively minor offenses, and by the time the system is done with them, they've spent serious prison time and basically had their life destroyed, all because they have a disease. And this is not to mention the heavy burden of a criminal record, felony convictions, often for minor theft and drug possession. This haunts a person for the rest of their life, making it hard to get jobs and even rent apartments. Most of these folks are regular people who, but for a chronic brain disease, would lead normal, productive lives. Like all diseases, the symptoms of the disease, in this case bad behavior, go away if we take care of the defect, in this case a brain defect. So why don't we focus on doing that? I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences for behavior, believe me, and some folks should go to jail and sometimes it helps. But I would submit that the CJS does far more harm than good. So is there a better way? If we want to save lives and address this epidemic, we need the medical profession to take over and provide for the long-term treatment of this chronic disease. Each year we have more deaths from overdoses, more misery, more destroyed families. So ask yourself, how's the criminal justice system doing so far? Don't get me wrong, the CJS tries. The drug courts, jail programs, John's very involved with all of those. They're doing what they can, but these have developed out of desperation and necessity. And while it's commendable and helpful at the margins, the CJS, the criminal justice system, is there to administer justice and or punishment and protect the community, not solve one of the most difficult medical problems that we face. Many folks in the CJS try, but the system erects barriers that make it much harder than it should be to recover. No one in the CJS signed up for this. These judges and jailers aren't medical doctors. They didn't go to school to treat a mental health disease. They're not trained, they're not educated in SUD medicine. In fact, it's common knowledge that many judges think SUD is something a person can control, a moral failing. They figure if they throw them in jail enough, they'll eventually figure it out. And in Virginia, the judges won't refuse to put even 1 hour of substance use disorder education on their annual continuing education agenda. That fact alone says all you need to know about the system's interest in treating this disease. Why aren't we treating this disease like a disease, the afflicted as patients, with compassion and empathy? That's what must change. There's, of course, much research and attention to the disease today and much literature, but I'd like to point out or draw your attention to a report issued a couple of years ago by the United States Surgeon General called Facing Addiction in America. The Surgeon General called on the world's foremost experts in substance use disorder and put together a comprehensive analysis of SUD and what we can do about it. This is our government's official position on SUD and its treatment. Nowhere, not once, in this 500 or so pages, is there one mention of the criminal justice system as a treatment modality. Instead, it stresses evidence-based medical treatment. As stated in the report, quote, well-supported scientific evidence shows that SUDs can be effectively treated with recurrent rates no higher than those for other chronic diseases such as diabetes, asthma, and hypertension. With comprehensive continuing care, recovery is now an achievable outcome. Unquote. Everybody should read this report, particularly our judges and prosecutors, because this is our government's official position statement, and it's got some really good stuff in it. It's time to decriminalize drugs. This is a recommendation that's been made by the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and many other highly respected public health organizations. What decriminalization means is that no one is jailed or prosecuted for small amounts of drugs. Let's focus on treatment and use the CJS as an assist to the medical professionals in their treatment. Instead of jail, divert these people to long-term treatment programs where medical professionals can oversee the progress. Let's face it, the war on drugs, Prohibition 2, is an abject failure. Expect the prison industrial complex and law enforcement to object to this because it's bad for business. If there was less than 1 million people in jail, 1 million people less people in jail, how would they justify those big budgets? People with SUD require punishment sometimes, but don't destroy them, help them. Divert to medical treatment without criminal records. Don't suspend their license for non-driving offenses. Get them out of being stuck in jail because of drugs and use that money to develop residential treatment facilities. Yeah, they're bad guys, and the CJS needs to deal with those. But most sick people benefit from medical treatment. Yes, addicts drive people crazy with their crazy behavior, some of it dangerous to themselves and others. But let the medical profession fix the defect, and you fix the person. There is an example to look at in Portugal, who decriminalized drugs in 2001. They have lowered their overdose death rate to 3 per million people per year. 3 per million people per year. The United States overdose death rate is 185 people per million per year. That's 60 times greater than Portugal. And now Portugal's was over 100 when they started this. It's dropped 85%. Lots of other information from there, it's online, you could look at it, that show dramatic reduction in heroin addiction, HIV infections, all sorts of positive outcomes, much better recovery rates. I don't have any time to go into all the benefits of decriminalization, but you can certainly read up on that online. It's time for a radical change in our approach. If you believe this, call your lawmaker. Let them know what you think. We can change this and get the criminal justice system out of the business of trying to treat substance use disorders. Thank you.
And you got Mike.
Oh, yeah.